Tonight, the pensioner murdered by cold callers.
Yes.
It was like having the rug swept from your feet. We've had a life taken from us.
Plus, exclusive access to the detectives taking on the cyber criminals.
It's a massively evolving threat, and we have to evolve with that threat.
And the postcard which could solve a murder mystery.
If we identify the person that wrote this card, they will hold the key to the murder of Sally Ann John.
Live for the next hour, this is Crimewatch. Good evening and welcome to Crimewatch. Tonight we're taking on the cyber criminals. So we brought our mobile incident unit to Bletchley Park in Milton Keynes, a place synonymous with the incredible work of Second World War codebreakers who managed to crack Nazi communiques, thereby shortening the war and saving countless lives.
These huts at Bletchley were also home to the birth of the information age, with code-breaking machines like the bomb and the world's first electronic computer, Colossus. But even the brilliant minds who worked here, including Alan Turing, who sat at this very desk, are unlikely to have predicted how information technology and its misuse would impact our lives. Today, internet fraud, hacking and blackmail are serious threats, even when you least expect it.
Can I interest you in a free coffee?
You got Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay, Simon, info is...
Your birthday's on the 22nd of the 8th. Josh, 26, chef, and you're a Gemini?
I thought everything was all secure. Yeah, it's very surprising.
Yeah, we got them. We're able to see things like date of birth, passwords, mother's maiden names.
Senoritas.
In worst case scenarios, we've seen this type of information being used against people. This can be absolutely devastating.
But we begin with a shocking crime committed just 15 minutes up the road from here on the other side of Milton Keynes. It happened after Han Yin Lung, a 64-year-old former police officer, went to answer her front door early one evening at the end of January.
To see the house completely ransacked and the chaos, it was so awful.
Han Yin Lung lived in Milton Keynes with her husband. The family moved from Hong Kong in 1997, where Han had been a police officer.
Since coming over to England, they've tried to make ends meet whatever way they could.
After years of hard work and saving, they bought and ran their own takeaway business. But family was always Hang's top priority.
No matter how difficult situations got, she would always try and help me where possible.
On the 31st of January, Hang was alone at home while her husband worked. At 6 p.m., she answered the door to a man she didn't know. She was held down, beaten around the head and threatened. As the gang ransacked every corner of her home. They searched the house for a terrifying 15 minutes before leaving with a watch, cash, and Hang's Police Long Service Medal. Injured and afraid, Hang phoned her son who alerted the police.
Her voice was toneless. There was no emotion in it whatsoever.
Footage caught by officers arriving at the scene shows the level of destruction. A shaken and vulnerable Hang can be seen cowering in her living room.
She looked completely frail. Her personality was voided. There was no energy. Completely different to the woman I had grown up with.
Traumatized, Hang became unwell and the next day was taken into hospital.
It was like having the rug swept from your feet. Every day you would go in and you would see her and you would have hope that she would recover.
She died 11 days after the burglary. Police are treating her death as murder.
For me, when I think of burglary, I think of someone stealing material possessions, money, objects, things that can be replaced. But for my family, this burglary has meant that we've had a life taken from us. What's important is justice for what's happened to Mum, so that nobody has to go through this again.
A dreadful case. Well, we can speak to the lead detective, DI Andy Sherwood, now. And what exactly, Andy, did they make away with?
Yes, Jeremy, they stole a gold Rolex Oyster watch. And that was something that the family bought in Hong Kong in more prosperous times and brought back to the UK with them. They also stole Hang's police long service medal when she was a police officer in Hong Kong. They stole a number of Hong Kong dollars, along with a Louis Vuitton handbag and also a gold necklace which was diamond encrusted.
There was a purse too found several hours after the burglary, and could be significant.
Yes, indeed. So the burglary itself was in the Milton Keynes area, and that property travelled some distance to Aylesbury, about 21 miles away.
This is the purse, yeah.
Indeed, and it was found on the Weedham Road at about 9:40 p.m. that evening. So we're keen for anyone that saw that property being discarded, perhaps thrown out of a vehicle between 6:40 and 9:40 that evening.
OK, and very clear image of a man on CCTV that you'd like to speak to.
Yes, this man was seen at the shopping centre in Milton Keynes. You can see him on the left in the footage with the Chelsea top on. Anyone who knows him, we'd love you to get in touch with us this evening and tell us who he is.
Clearly a terrifying burglary. And if we look at some of the body cam images that were taken, does this strike you as being unusual in its ferocity?
Well, thankfully, burglaries of this type are extremely rare. On this occasion, the violence shown and the destruction caused was totally over the top. When they knew that Hang was at home, they could simply have walked away, but chose to continue to commit this despicable crime. And it's really important that anyone with any information get in touch with us tonight and prevent these offenders from committing a similar crime again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Andy. As you can tell, a really awful case, this one. If you can help in any way, I would really urge you to pick up the phone. The number to call is 08 085 600 600. Calls are free from landlines and mobile phones. Tina.
Tonight's roundup of criminals caught on camera now, beginning with a very nasty stabbing of a man in East London. This is quick but utterly shocking. A man is walking home from his local social club, as he's done every Friday night for years. But this time he's being followed. Suddenly he's grabbed from behind and stabbed repeatedly in what police say is a totally unprovoked and motiveless attack. The heartless thug leaves empty-handed. The victim suffered injuries to his lung, stomach, bowel and liver and was in a critical condition in a coma for 2 days. He was lucky to survive and is still receiving hospital treatment. Who is the violent knifeman responsible? You know what to do. These two men have walked into a supermarket just off the South Circular in Eltham, South London. But they're not here for groceries. One has what appears to be a gun. They round up the petrified shop workers. The gunman threatens the staff and demands cash from the till. The other robber threatens the female worker with a large knife as he steals cigarettes from behind the counter. The gunman demands every last penny from the till. And clearly shows us his face. Police believe this car dashcam footage catches the robbers as they flee and get picked up by a white Land Rover Evoque car. They left with just £150 in cash and the cigarettes. Do you recognise them or their voices? Keep your eyes on this silver car. Police say the occupants tried to break into a workman's van. The van's owner and his friends spot them, and just out of view of the camera, they try and stop the theft. But the car speeds off. The workman tries to make them stop, but he's thrown into the air and left for dead on the road. Thankfully, he needed just 3 days in hospital and is now making a good recovery. Police say this camera also catches the callous crooks. Can you name them? St Ives in Cornwall, in the early hours of a Tuesday morning. This man is covering his face for a reason. He smashes his way into a small family-owned business, breaking down the door, before scarpering with a large amount of high-value gold jewellery. He may have tried to hide his identity, but can you unmask him and name him tonight? This one isn't subtle. As you can see, a rail depot in central London, and this man is using a novel way to get inside. After struggling with a hammer, he resorts to brute force and uses a sledgehammer-axe combination instead. Once he's in, he causes extensive damage to the toilets, doors and appliances. But he's not finished yet. Next, he climbs over the roof to another compound. Here, he breaks into one of the vans. I'm not sure if he's passed his driving test, though. Watch as he tries to get out. He eventually smashes through the gates before continuing his wrecking spree and ramming another set of gates. It might seem comical, but more than £30,000 worth of damage was caused. Who is this hapless vandal? Someone must recognise him. Call on the usual Crimewatch number, 08085 600 600, if you can name anyone that we've just shown. Or you can text us on 63399. Just type crime space and then your message. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. And remember, you can also follow all of the developments during the programme on our live updates webpage.
As this exhibition inside one of Bletchley's buildings shows, the face of crime is changing. In fact, this year, the National Crime Survey, for the first time, actually included online crime statistics in its figures. And they showed that last year, in England and Wales, there were 6 million cases. In fact, just last week, the travel association ABTA said there'd been an attack on its website, which had affected 43,000 people. So the amount of fraud and hacking and blackmail that lurks beneath the surface of our ever more internet-dependent lives is staggering. The question is what the detectives can do to bring the cyber criminals down.
The thing about technology, the internet, devices, connectivity, is that it has done the same thing for cyber criminals that it has done for the rest of us. It's made life a lot easier.
Cybercrime's not a UK problem, it's a global problem.
This kind of crime could cost the UK up to £193 billion a year.
We live more of our lives online than ever before. Our homes, cars, and even our toys are becoming increasingly connected.
The connectivity afforded by the internet is a fantastic thing in terms of the ability to connect.
But this convenience comes with a risk. If the internet opens a window on our world, who might we unwittingly be letting in?
Anywhere where you have access, some kind of connection to the internet or a wider network will create vulnerabilities.
This sinister potential is fueled by the so-called Internet of Things, where devices from watches to baby monitors can be hacked.
Your fridge will tell you when it needs more milk. Your alarm will set itself when nobody's in the home. But if it is not robust and secure, it will actively place you at risk.
The scale of online crime is already huge. One of the most recent online scams targets people buying a house.
We lost nearly £48,000 to a fraudster who was able to hack into email traffic between ourselves and our conveyancing solicitor. I don't think I've ever had a more stressful period.
Policing this new crime is riddled with challenges. We've been given unprecedented access to the team tackling cyber-enabled crime in the UK capital, an area packed with banks, businesses, and the largest population in the country.
We've now got over 275 officers within London dedicated to dealing with cybercrime.
The Specialist Met Unit Falcon was set up 2.5 years ago.
What we need to talk to you about are some further instances of fraud.
Since then, they have charged almost 1,000 suspects and seized more than £12 million from criminals.
We will be using very high levels of covert techniques.
But online fraud is just the beginning. From organised gangs to lone sexual predators, criminals are fast learning how to exploit internet weaknesses.
Online solicitation, grooming of children, sextortion. So we're seeing a full spectrum of cybercriminal activity.
Recent cyber breaches have seen millions of people's personal data stolen, elections hacked, and hospitals held to ransom. In response, the government opened a new National Cyber Security Centre last month.
We think we can automatically reduce the threat to the general public from cybercrime at scale.
Across just 2 weeks, they blocked 360,000 fraudulent emails from reaching their potential victims.
So we've reduced the harm window, and we need to do better, and there's more to do. But as an example of where we think we can reduce harm at massive scale, that's a great example.
A similar online scam tore Jackie Edwards' life apart when her 17-year-old autistic son, Joseph, was targeted.
He'd received a fake police, I think it was a pop-up. It had said that he had accessed illegal websites and committed acts of terrorism, child pornography, and that he had to pay a penalty. And if he didn't pay this penalty, he would be prosecuted and sent to prison.
Joseph's autism meant he took the letter literally.
I came in, I thought Joseph was getting the Hoover out the cupboard under the stairs. And it wasn't until I approached him that I realised something was wrong and looked over and there was a chair on the floor. He'd hung himself. The impact is devastating. My life will never, ever, ever be the same again.
So, with the stakes so high, how can we best protect ourselves?
If we take a few simple precautions to protect ourselves, the vast majority of these attacks are easily prevented.
People will do things online that they will never do in the real world. So would you accept a package or a gift from a stranger in a real world context? No.
Most cyber attacks start with an email. Most cyber attacks exploit vulnerabilities that have already been patched. And so if people have up-to-date software, they're much, much safer than if they don't.
Take some time. Don't click on that button because then it's too late.
You can find details of organisations offering information and support with a range of issues featured in that film at bbc.co.uk/actionline. Or you can call free at any time to hear recorded information on 08000 839 839. It's also worth knowing that victims of any crime can speak to victim support. They are on 0808 1689 111. And if you can help with the conveyancing fraud case we showed, where Donald Kelly and his wife lost over £47,000, police would very much like to hear from you. They'd also like to speak to this man, who may be called Khaludin or Kaleem Mohammed, about any information he might have on the case. If you know where he might be, please get in touch using the numbers on the screen. Right, still to come tonight, the mysterious postcard which could unlock a murder investigation.
Within the postcard we have a capital E which is written like an L, then a top stroke and then a middle stroke. Amongst all of Sally Ann's writing, I didn't find one example of that. Someone other than Sally Ann wrote this postcard.
Wanted faces first, starting with David Daniel Hayes. He was due in court charged with a number of serious sexual offences against children, but didn't turn up and is now on the run. Hayes is 38 and may now have a beard and moustache. He has links to North Wales, Cheshire and the west of England, but may now be in the Netherlands.
This is Ruben Gomez, although you may know him as Ruben Suarez. Detectives want to question him in connection to the kidnap of a man from a street in southwest London. Gomez is 19 and has links across London and also to Neath in South Wales.
Face number 3 is Daniel Gilbert. Detectives in Derbyshire think he may have vital information about the rape of a woman. Gilbert, who might now have a beard, is 30 and has links to Birmingham and the Derby, Ilkeston and Amber Valley areas of Derbyshire.
Finally for now is this man, Marcus Tumazos, or Andreas as he's sometimes known. Detectives want to question him after a credit card was defrauded to the value of almost £1 million. Tumazos is 48 and has friends and family in Cyprus and also in Enfield in North London. He has Greek writing tattooed on his left arm. If you know where any of tonight's faces might be, please do get in touch on 08 085 600 600. Calls are free from landlines and mobiles, and we'll go through the rest of the lineup a little later.
Sally Ann John was just 23 when she went missing from Swindon in 1995. She's never been seen since, and detectives believe she was murdered. Tonight, for the very first time, we can reveal previously unseen clues in the case, including the mysterious postcards supposedly sent by Sally to one of her friends 3 weeks after she disappeared.
They came to tell me on the Sunday that she'd gone missing. I told them then that she was dead. It's a horrible feeling that your daughter may have been murdered. That your daughter may have been murdered.
This is Operation Minerva. It may look like any other police incident room, but there's a big difference. Sally Ann John, the woman at the heart of the investigation, went missing in 1995, and police now believe she was killed. What's unusual is that her body has never been found.
Murder investigations where the body hasn't been found can be challenging. Normally, if you have the body at the scene of a murder, it offers up forensic opportunities and holds vital clues to identify killers responsible for that person's death. In this case, although we haven't got a body, there are still plenty of opportunities for us to explore. We have a vital piece of evidence which we haven't revealed to the public before. This piece of information may help us identify the person or persons responsible for the murder of Sally Ann John.
Well, I had Sally Ann the day the Queen came to Swindon in 1971. I just thought she was lovely. She used to go on she had a little bike. She used to ride up and down the drive on that, and we just go for a walk. We go to the park. You take a picnic to the park. She was always happy. She was always bubbly. She was always nice to everybody. That was just her nature.
But as she grew up, Sally Ann developed a rebellious streak.
When she was sort of in her late teens, she did start going around with the wrong people, and just didn't matter how much I tried to sort of say, you know, these people aren't good for you and stuff like that. It's like anything. If somebody tells you that don't do this, you'll go and do it.
By the time Sally Ann reached her early 20s, she had become a sex worker in Swindon.
I didn't want her to do that. No mother wants her to do that, you know, so... Stop a minute. Please. But I spoke to her and I tried, you know, but it was just, that's what she did.
It was a tough and often dangerous existence, but Sally's friends remember her as fun-loving and kind. And she had hopes for a better life.
Sally Ann did have plans for her future. We are aware from speaking to family and friends that she was looking to get away from the life that she was living, obviously settling down, starting a family and holding down regular employment.
But one night in September 1995, Sally Ann John disappeared. Sally was reported missing to the police. They searched her flat, but found nothing missing.
I thought something must have happened to her because she'd left all her things, everything she owned in the flat she lived in. She didn't take anything with her.
There were two trains of thought that obviously she may have gone missing of her own volition, but also that she may have come to some harm.
With no solid lead, the police scaled down the investigation. Sally Ann was classed as a missing person. Then, in 2013, police reviewed the case.
We reviewed the original lines of inquiry and conducted further inquiries to see if there's any proof of life that Sally may be living somewhere else within the UK or abroad. All those inquiries drew a blank. Sadly, we've concluded that there is no evidence at this time that Sally Ann John is still alive.
A missing persons case became a murder investigation. To piece together what happened, detectives had to go back to the night Sally Ann disappeared.
On the night that Sally was last seen, we know that she was in these streets just near to Swindon Town Centre. She met that night with friends between 9 and 9:30 and was looking to work through till about midnight.
Finally, at 10:50, Sally was spoken to by police officers on Alexandra Road.
We need to hear from anyone that saw Sally Ann that night or has any information about what happened after that.
But that's not all. For the first time, police are now sharing some striking, previously unreleased evidence. 3 weeks after her disappearance, a postcard was delivered to one of Sally's friends.
Dear Clive, I thought I'd write as I've heard you've been missing me and that you were rather worried that something had happened to me. As you can see, I'm in London now, but no one compares to you, big boy.
This is a postcard supposedly sent by Sally Ann John to a male friend in Swindon, letting him know that she was safe and well.
But something wasn't right. The postcard was sent off for forensic analysis.
Within the postcard, we have a capital E, which is written like an L, then a top stroke, and then a middle stroke. Whereas Amongst all of Sally Ann's reference writing, I didn't find one example of that. There was very strong support that someone other than Sally Ann wrote this postcard.
But if Sally didn't write the card, who did?
The investigation team strongly suspect that the person that wrote this card was either coerced into writing it, was misled into writing it, or equally, it may be the person involved in her disappearance. If we identify the person that wrote this card, they will hold the key to the murder of Sally Ann John.
It's a horrible feeling that your daughter may have been murdered because you can't do anything about it. I just want her found. I really do want her found. And I want whoever did this to be accounted for. I'd like to know where she is so we can put her to rest. And then this whole nightmare be over.
Well, joining me now is DS Don Pocock of Wiltshire Police, still deeply distressing for Sally Ann's mum, even after all this time. But you're hopeful that this mysterious postcard, which we're seeing for the first time tonight, may reveal more about what happened.
Absolutely. We strongly suspect that the person that wrote that postcard was either coerced into writing it, misled into writing it, or equally, the person that wrote that postcard is responsible for the murder of Sally Ann John.
This happened a long time ago. 22 years have passed. Do you think there are people out there possibly watching tonight who have more information?
Absolutely. I'm appealing to members of the public tonight, particularly in Swindon, to come forward with information that they might have about the movements of Sally Ann John just prior to her going missing, and equally in the aftermath of her going missing, any information they may have about the location of her body or persons involved in her murder. Some
news reports have linked Sally Ann's murder to Christopher Halliwell, a convicted killer who worked as a taxi driver with links to Swindon. Is that still a line of inquiry for you?
We remain open-minded in relation to our lines of inquiry. We have liaised with our colleagues that are dealing with Mr Halliwell. What I would urge is the media not to speculate about the connection with Mr Halliwell because of the distress it causes to the family of Sally Ann John.
And finally, tell us about the reward.
Yeah, Wiltshire Police are offering a reward of £25,000 for information that leads to the recovery of Sally Ann John's body, or equally securing the conviction of the person or persons responsible for her murder. OK, Don, for now, thank you very much indeed. Please do call now if you have any information which could help. The usual Crimewatch number again is 08085 600 600, or you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously about any of tonight's cases. They are on 0800 555 111.
More cases the police need your help to crack now, starting with CCTV of an attempted murder in Tower Hamlets in East London. Detectives want to identify the occupants of this white BMW. It's caught on camera waiting in Ernest Street around 7 p.m. on the 24th of September last year. Minutes later, it drives away, and just off screen, a man is shot in the leg. Police say at least 6 rounds were fired. The victim and his friend can be seen here running to safety. Detectives say it's sheer fluke someone wasn't killed. The BMW was later found abandoned. Detectives believe there were a number of people in the area at the time who may have witnessed the shooting, and they would like them to come forward tonight. There's a reward of up to £10,000 on the case.
Now, you may remember that in our first programme we appealed for information on the whereabouts of convicted murderer Sean Walmsley, who escaped from prison guards whilst on a hospital visit in Liverpool last month. Unfortunately, he's still at large, so tonight detectives are releasing the full video of his escape in the hope of bringing him back to justice. It shows the moment the terrified guards were overpowered by armed men before Walmsley and his accomplices escaped in a gold Volvo. The car was caught on camera waiting moments earlier and was later found abandoned. Well, detectives stress that Walmsley and those harbouring him are dangerous and could be armed. They shouldn't be approached. Tonight, they're announcing a £20,000 reward for information leading to his capture.
In 2015, television presenter Gloria Hunniford had more than £120,000 stolen from her bank account. Tonight, we can reveal the actual film footage for the first time. It shows a woman going into a bank in Croydon on the 3rd of June. Police say she claimed to be the television presenter. Another woman seen here claimed to be her daughter. Later that day, almost £121,000 was drained from Gloria's account. Do you recognise either of them? We can also release this signature, which detectives say was used in the scam.
The first feeling is really a shock. Then, how could they do that? The questions start. Anger, frustration. So it's a mix of everything, and it's very annoying and frustrating and disappointing that when you think your money is safe and locked away, that actually it isn't.
Do you recognise either of those women or the signature? Please call now if you do. Well, tonight we have been looking at the prolific growth in cybercrime. Such is the threat to individuals, businesses and even states that there are plans next year to open an elite boarding school here at Bletchley Park to train the next generation of codebreakers. Hopefully they'll be a bit more savvy than the rest of us when it comes to safeguarding our information and privacy. To see just how vulnerable many of us are, we decided to set up a little experiment.
Hi, you alright? Can I help you?
I'll have a latte to take away, please.
We've rigged this coffee shop with hidden cameras and got a member of our team to serve the drinks.
You take a seat by there and I'll call you over, okay?
Outside, we'll be encouraging people in with free coffee if they like our Facebook page.
Can I interest you in a free coffee?
You got Facebook?
Yeah.
And downstairs, we've got Cal Leeming, formerly the UK's youngest convicted hacker. He's now a cybersecurity advisor.
Okay, we have Ollie coming in now.
He goes to...
He, along with team member David, will be finding information that's out there for anyone to see online.
She was in Sydney for New Year's.
Go with your friend for New Year's Eve.
Yeah. How did you know that?
Yeah, we got him.
Your birthday's on the 22nd of the 8th and your email starts with Liam.
Yeah. Doing your research.
She's about to comment right now.
Have you liked and commented on the page?
Wait. In a relationship with...
You play the guitar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know this?
I'm just going to have a look at the rest of his timeline now.
Josh, 26, chef, and you're a Gemini.
A bit shocked, actually, how easy it is to be able to, I don't know, get in my information.
Okay, Simon, info is...
You're a long way from home.
Sorry?
Are you travelling back to today?
Worked at the Royal Mail.
You used to work at the Royal Mail and you're a coach driver.
I thought everything was all secure and that, so yeah, it was very surprising.
You're going back to Newquay anytime soon? I know you went last year.
Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of these sites offer up to the public, if you haven't protected them properly, personal information.
It was all out there. All out there. Yeah.
We're able to see things like date of birth, passwords, mother's maiden names. Worst case scenarios, we've seen this type of information being used against people in extortion, blackmail. This can be absolutely devastating.
It's quite creepy, like what you can find out on the internet, isn't it? Like...
Incredible stuff. It just goes to show you can't be too careful, especially when free coffee is involved. If you have a moment, do take a look at the Crimewatch website, which has lots of information and advice about how you can protect yourself online. So, still to come tonight, how police caught a despicable killer who tortured a 77-year-old grandmother for her PIN number.
The night of the murder, Mrs. Edmonds' card was used at a cash point.
We knew that that was either the killer or someone who knew who the killer was. If we could identify that person, it would undoubtedly crack open this case.
Time for more wanted faces first, starting with Benjamin Stephen Parkinson. The 27-year-old was jailed for 7 years for a violent robbery, but was released on licence and is now wanted back in prison. He has a tattoo of the words "Established 1989" on his chest and links to Worcestershire, the West Midlands and Sussex.
Face number 6 is Abdullah Hada Mokadan. Now, he was granted bail after being convicted of meeting a girl under 16, having groomed her online. But he failed to return and is now on the run. Originally from Iran, he now has links to Stockton and Durham. The 26-year-old has a slight stammer and is partially deaf.
Do you recognise 31-year-old Kai Phillips? Detectives investigating an assault on a cyclist in southwest London think Phillips may have vital information and would like to speak to him. He has a number of scars on both elbows and links to Lambeth in South London and across Surrey.
Finally, we have 28-year-old Ian Sparks. Detectives in Lancashire want to question him about the theft of tens of thousands of pounds from gaming machines. Sparks has links to Blackpool, Manchester and Oldham.
If you know where any of the faces are, get in touch using the numbers on screen. You can find all the details on our website alongside more people the police need your help to locate.
Now you've been helping put even more criminals behind bars since our last programme, including Craig Hawkswell, who also identified as Lisa Hawkswell. You called in after we featured the case 2 weeks ago and he was arrested the following day. He's now starting his 14-year sentence for 2 counts of rape and 7 charges of indecent assault against teenage girls. Thank you so much for your crucial calls on that.
A great result. In February last year, we showed this home security footage of a break-in at a house in Regent's Park in London. 47 watches worth an estimated £500,000 were stolen. Well, as a direct result of that appeal, this man, 44-year-old Alexander Duff, was arrested. He pleaded guilty to the burglary and has now been jailed for 3 years.
Avon and Somerset Police appealed for your help in September to identify drug dealers wanted for selling heroin and crack cocaine on the streets of Yeovil. Incredibly, you helped identify all of the men, and as a direct result, 22-year-old Matthew Jubo has been jailed for 2 years and 4 months. And this man, 23-year-old Kane Bear, received 3.5 years.
Finally, you should know you've helped put all these wanted faces behind bars for jail terms totalling more than 60 years. Take a look at our Live Updates webpage for the full details.
Truly impressive stuff. Thank you so much for all of your calls, texts and emails. As you can see, they really do make a difference. In 2008, a beloved grandmother was brutally murdered at her Hampshire cottage. She'd been stabbed several times and tortured for the PIN number of her debit card before being beaten to death with a marble rolling pin. We reconstructed the case several months after the attack, but it would take another 8 years and 2 trials for her killer to be finally brought to justice.
She was very loved. She was very funny, very kind, very gentle. She loved flowers. She loved her grandchildren. She was a great mother.
The 77-year-old widow Georgina Edmonds lived in a picturesque part of rural Hampshire.
She lived in a sweet little cottage by the river. Couldn't have been prettier.
It's a lovely area next to the River Itchen, all sorts of things in the garden, and it was just a place that Granny liked.
But in 2008, the cottage she loved was the scene of a terrifying attack and Georgina's last moments.
We know that Mrs. Edmonds was up quite early. Her dogs were collected to go out for a walk.
Yes, see you later.
And then she had quite a usual appointment in the morning where her hairdresser came to her house and did her hair. That's the last person that we know saw Mrs. Edmonds alive.
Sometime during the hours that followed, Georgina was subjected to a brutal ordeal. At around 5:45, her son and the groundskeeper noticed the cottage was still in darkness.
I went into the kitchen and there was my poor mother lying on the floor. in a big pool of blood.
Police emergency.
It looks to me as if she's been hit over the head. She looks as if she's dead. I think this is a murder.
Police in Hampshire have launched a murder inquiry after the body of a 77-year-old woman was found at a house near Winchester.
She suffered 37 different injuries, including 12 stab wounds to her neck, chest and abdomen, and was hit over the head several times with this marble rolling pin with such force that the rolling pin broke. The only thing taken was her handbag, which contained her mobile phone and her bank card. We do think she was effectively tortured for that PIN number.
Officers began a physical and forensic search for clues.
We were in the house for the best part of 2 weeks, recovering numerous pieces of evidence. Literally hundreds of fingerprints raised, various items recovered for DNA.
But the challenges of the case were soon apparent.
It was a rural area and we had large swathes of woodland to search. We couldn't find anybody who would have any sense of motive to kill Mrs. Edmonds, so we were very clear this is a stranger attack. There's somebody out there who we think has randomly walked into a cottage of an old lady and tortured and murdered her.
Just 3 days after the attack, officers had their first breakthrough.
At 10:38 on the night of the murder, Mrs. Edmonds' card was used at a Tesco Express cash point near the centre of Eastleigh. It was used by somebody dressed in a large fluorescent jacket who put the card into the machine and tried to get £200 out and put in the wrong number and then walked off.
We knew that that was either the killer or someone who knew who the killer was. So if we could identify that person, it would undoubtedly crack open this case.
The images gave detectives important leads.
He knew there was a CCTV camera above the cash point and didn't look at it the whole time. But crucially, rather than walking around the front of the store to the cash point, he stepped over a fence. So we did some work around who uses that route. In a day, we had 400 people. Only 8 of them used that route. Every single one of them was a local person. So in my mind, this is a local crime with a person who had been to the cash point before.
Officers began to circulate the image. Despite receiving hundreds of names, none brought them closer to the person at the cash point. As well as the card, the killer had also stolen Georgina's mobile phone.
Quite early on in the inquiry, we realised that her phone had actually been switched on or switched off because there was an indication from a telephone mast. And that enabled us then to do an extensive search in and around the area where we thought the phone may be, and we located the phone on the riverbank, which is on the sort of exit scene from her house.
We believe the offender tried to throw the mobile phone in the river and missed the river.
Police collected a list of all the mobile numbers used in that area on the day of the murder.
We had 220,000 numbers off memory, which was, what do you do with 220,000 numbers? Fundamentally, that list was only relevant when we had somebody to compare numbers with.
Detectives were, however, getting closer. Behind the scenes, forensic inquiries were ongoing.
It was a little while into the inquiry when we've got a partial DNA profile from the rolling pin, the actual murder weapon itself, which was very significant, but at the same time it was quite a low level. It was a mixture, and it was very difficult to interpret. There was no one on the database that matched it. Then what happened was a slow process of trying to establish everyone that had been in that cottage over the previous 2 years.
But none matched the sample found on the rolling pin.
We started to realise at least some of that belonged to the killer.
Officers began comparing the DNA profile to the thousands of potential suspects they'd previously spoken to, and one name stood out. Police had questioned the man in 2008.
Good evening, sir.
He had one conviction for possession of cocaine, and he lived within the vicinity, within a couple of miles from the ATM.
At the time, he had provided an alibi and willingly gave his fingerprints and DNA. And 2 years later, this DNA matched the mixed partial profile on the rolling pin. The man was 31-year-old Matthew Hamlin.
We spent a lot of time building a picture of his background and really understanding him. And every inquiry we did, every little thing we did pointed towards him.
He was quite a violent man. He'd had an incident with his partner where he'd ended up hitting her around the head with an ironing board twice.
Therefore, she took the car that they both used and drove to see some friends. So on the day of the murder, Matthew Hamlin didn't have a car, which fitted the fact we thought we had somebody on foot.
Officers quickly broke his alibi, and the mobile phone number he used at the time of the murder also unlocked vital clues.
We found he had one call in the vicinity of Fig Tree Cottage around the time of the murder. But secondly, in a small 10-minute window, he was in an area where Mrs. Eden's phone was subsequently found. We thought it's time to arrest him.
In June 2010, Matthew Hamlin was brought into custody.
Of course, the first thing is, you ask the question, are you responsible for the death? And he said he wasn't. So you know that this is going to be a protracted length of interviews.
I can't remember if I was there.
He never shouted, he never got annoyed, but he was always very non-committal.
Have you committed a burglary at Fig Tree Cottage?
I can say about burglary in general, I don't think I have.
He was being evasive. I thought he had something to hide. And from very early on, I suspected that we did have the right person.
But they still didn't have enough evidence to charge. Hamlin was released on bail, and the team were left to further build their case. One thing would be key: the DNA.
Normally, to get a full match, your profile will be 1 in a billion, i.e. it's 1 billion times more likely that person is the killer than a random member of the public. And our ratio was in the thousands. But we thought that was still convincing when you put that one bit of evidence in the round.
In November 2011, 18 months after he was first arrested, Matthew Hamlin went on trial for Georgina's murder.
I went every single day and listened to everything. He looked rather insignificant. It's just terribly hard to imagine anyone doing such a vicious crime. Just, you know, smashing up my mother.
10 weeks later, the jury reached their decision.
I remember the jury coming in to give the verdict, and some of them were crying.
Not guilty.
I was sitting in the gallery with a family, and all thoughts immediately went to them. It was personally disappointing, but really, you knew for them, this was devastation. There was no prospect of trying to try someone else for this murder. All the evidence had pointed to him.
But it wasn't the end.
I couldn't have lived myself if I hadn't tried.
Following the murder, police had taken several tapings from Georgina's clothes and the crime scene.
On those tape-ins were over 1,000 skin cells. And I just felt that some of them had to belong to the offender, and it was always a case of, well, how do I find them? And the advice up to that point had always been, you can't. But I just thought, this may be the only chance.
It was agreed they would test the tapings from the sleeve of Georgina's blouse.
When the scientists came back with the result, their first words was, Martin, you better sit down. It looks like we've got a single source of DNA, and it matches Matthew Hamlin.
The figure was 1 in 26 million. But what that means is it's 26 million times more likely that the DNA that we found on Georgina's blouse comes from Matthew Hamlin.
That was huge. I mean, it was justification. We knew before, we knew we were right first time, but this was just proof.
In October 2014, Hamlin was arrested and charged for a second time. Officers now had to convince the Court of Appeal that their evidence was new and compelling.
That was the difficult part. In my own mind, I thought we could lose it at the Court of Appeal because a lot of cases fall down at that point.
But in May 2015, his acquittal was quashed, making it only the 7th double jeopardy case in British history. And 8 months later, Matthew Hamlin went on trial for a second time for Georgina's murder.
We knew we had strong evidence. We had a scientist that would say the DNA was left at the time of the murder by direct contact by Matthew Hamlin.
After 6 weeks, the jury returned with their verdict.
Guilty. So that was a really exciting moment for everybody. You knew it was the right decision. That was the great thing, that justice had finally been done.
It's a solemn thing because he's guilty of murdering my mother in the most horrible way.
Just a relief, particularly for family, that this is finally over.
It's been a huge investigation. It's taken a long time, and it's a large part of my career, so it was very, very satisfying.
8 years after Georgina's death, Matthew Hamlin was handed a life sentence for her murder.
Justice is done, and now we move on, and it's spring, and I mean, I remember my mother for all the right reasons now. It's that last thing you can do for your loved one, is to get justice for them. And somehow then you feel they're at peace.
A terrible case, but justice served in the end. Right, just time before we go to check in with Tina, who has the latest on what's come in on the phones.
Well, we've had some good information come in on the Han Yung case. What's the latest?
Yeah, Tina, we've had a couple of really good calls about the person that we want to speak to in the CCTV, so we'll be following those up, but it'd be really good if we had more calls in relation to where that property might be,
And just
the watch.
to reiterate, that man isn't a suspect.
No, it's somebody that we want to speak to.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Keep the calls coming in.
Well, that is just about all we have for you on what's been another busy night. If you have information but you haven't been able to get through, do please keep trying. The Crimewatch lines are open until midnight tomorrow. And remember, you can head over right now to the Crimewatch website, where we'll be streaming live with all the latest developments on tonight's appeals.
Tonight was our last programme in this series, but Crimewatch Roadshow will be back on your screens in the summer.
For now, thank you so much for all of your calls.
They really do make a difference.
From everyone here at Bletchley Park, goodbye.
Good night.